Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I still remember the way my mom stirred her tea that morning, slow and deliberate like she was stalling for time, trying to figure out how to ruin my life gently. The air in the kitchen was tense, but not in a dramatic way. It was quiet, calculated, as if the conversation had already happened behind my back weeks before, and this was just the final scene. I was 17, just a few weeks from graduation, a straight-A student with early acceptance into 3 universities. I wasn't some reckless kid with pipe dreams either. I had been busting my ass, working part-time at a grocery store while pulling a 4.0 GPA. I wanted to major in engineering, maybe robotics or clean energy, something that could actually make a difference. Something I could be proud of. My dad looked up from his eggs like I'd just interrupted something sacred when I asked if we could finally sit down and talk about college costs. I'd put it off for months, trying not to push too hard, waiting for the right moment, hoping that when the time came, they'd be proud to invest in me. What I got instead was a flat, almost bored response. "Jack," my mom started, not even meeting my eyes, "we've decided to use the college fund for Nate's business." Just like that. No apology. No soft landing. Just a verbal slap right across the face. I blinked, waiting for the punchline. I honestly thought they were joking at first. Nate? My older brother? The guy who dropped out of community college after one semester because classes were too early? The same Nate who once said networking meant borrowing dad's truck to haul weed for his buddy Todd? That Nate was getting my college fund. Every damn cent of it. I asked them to explain, not screamed, not cried, just asked because my brain couldn't process the betrayal fast enough. My dad finally chimed in, voice firm and fatherly, like he was delivering life advice instead of gutting me alive. "We believe Nate has real potential, Jack. He just needs a proper boost. You'll figure it out. You're the responsible one." That phrase hit harder than anything. You'll figure it out. Like I was some side character in someone else's story. Like my hard work was a given, an obligation, something I'd do anyway because they'd trained me to expect nothing and deliver everything. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I laughed. A dry, quiet laugh that sounded more like choking. I left the table. I left the house. I left the idea that I was ever going to be seen the same way as Nate. That was the day I stopped being their son and started being a ghost in their lives, someone to nod at during holidays but never really see. I didn't move out right away. I didn't have the money or the plan. But I shut myself off emotionally from that point forward. I ate dinner in my room. I stopped asking questions. I worked extra shifts at the grocery store, trying to scrape together whatever scraps I could. They never asked how it was going. They never checked my grades again. Nate's landscaping business kicked off a month later with a new truck, branded flyers, and a lawnmower that cost more than my first car. They had invested in his future, and all I could do was watch from a distance as my own burned down without ceremony. The hardest part? I still loved them. That's the messed up thing about family. You can know deep in your bones they've betrayed you, and you'll still wish they'd see your pain, still hope they'll realize what they've done and apologize. But they didn't. Not once. Not even when I packed my things 2 years later and moved out with less than $400 in my checking account. I left a note on the counter that just said, "Don't worry, I'll figure it out." What followed was 2 years of pure survival. I couldn't afford university tuition, so I enrolled in community college one class at a time. I waited tables during the day, restocked shelves at night, and taught myself web design during whatever free hours I could scrape together. I slept 4 hours a night and aged 10 years in 24 months. Every time I saw Nate posting on Facebook about hustle culture or being your own boss, it made me want to put my fist through a wall. But there was a moment, a small, quiet moment, that changed everything. I was cleaning tables at this dingy diner, and this old man, probably in his 70s, left a business card under his empty coffee cup. He didn't say anything, just tipped his head at me and left. The card was glossy and simple. One line, looking for hard workers with something to prove. On the back, a website and a name I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away, but something made me check it out when I got home. It was a company offering paid apprenticeships in data analytics. The catch? You had to pass an entrance test that most people failed. I clicked through the site, heart pounding, and saw a button that just said apply now. I clicked it without thinking. My hands were shaking. 3 weeks later, I got the email. Not from a no-reply account, but from the founder himself. It said, "Jack, we'd like to talk." That was the moment it all began. The letter that made me realize I wasn't just clawing my way out of a hole, I was building a ladder no one else believed I could climb. I just didn't know yet how high I'd go. And somewhere far away, my parents were still telling people Nate was the one with all the potential. If there's one thing I learned after leaving home with nothing but a duffel bag full of clothes and a handful of resentment, it's that nobody gives a damn about how smart you are when you're mopping puke off the gas station floor at 3 in the morning. That was my life for almost 2 years, scrubbing toilets that looked like war zones, pretending not to notice the guy shooting up in the bathroom stall, counting quarters just to buy a cup of gas station coffee to stay awake between shifts. I worked the graveyard shift at the Speedway off Route 19, clocked out at 6, went to my morning class at community college, came home, ate whatever I could scrounge up, usually instant ramen and sometimes just saltines and peanut butter, and then took freelance gigs online until I passed out. Rinse, repeat. And I did that for 2 years straight. That's like 36 months without a break. At first, I was just doing what I had to do to survive, but somewhere in that blur of fluorescent lights and unpaid bills, something clicked in me. I realized I wasn't just running from the people who didn't believe in me, I was chasing something they never thought I could build. I taught myself how to code, one YouTube tutorial at a time. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, then PHP, Python, some SQL, a bit of back-end architecture. It was like building a language no one could take from me. I remember working on my first WordPress site for some local mechanic who barely spoke to me during the consultation and paid me in cash out of his sock drawer. That $50 felt like a goddamn victory lap. While I was grinding in silence, Nate was busy becoming a walking train wreck with a lawnmower. His business, and I use that term generously, wasn't so much a company as it was a slow-motion disaster fueled by entitlement and zero discipline. He spent more time designing business cards than actually landing clients, kept buying fancy equipment he didn't know how to use, and treated every week like it was spring break in Fort Lauderdale. I watched it all from a distance, shaking my head, biting my tongue, and sometimes laughing bitterly into my cup of oversteeped tea. Because that's what it became, not coffee anymore. Tea was cheaper when you reused the bag 3 times. The weird thing was, I wasn't even angry anymore. Not in the way I had been when I first left. Back then, it was all fire and noise inside my head, this need to scream, look at me, into the void my parents had left behind. But over time, the grind burned away the anger and left something sharper, focus. I wasn't doing this to prove them wrong anymore. I was doing it because it was the only way forward. Because I knew what rock bottom looked like and I refused to live there. I landed my first real break after submitting a small web app one built to a coding forum, just a dumb little inventory tracker with a clean interface and decent functionality. But a guy named Paul from Kansas City messaged me, said he liked my work, and asked if I'd be interested in a remote freelance contract. I thought it was a scam at first, honestly. People like Paul don't usually talk to guys like me. But we hopped on a call, he saw my screen, watched me debug something live, and offered me a paid project right then and there. It wasn't a lot, $500 spread over 3 weeks, but it was the first time anyone treated me like a professional instead of a charity case or a burnout working the graveyard shift. From there, it snowballed. One contract led to another, and I started getting invited into Slack channels, group chats, beta tests. I upgraded my laptop, paid for it in cash, after a full weekend of support tickets and error log scrubbing. I moved into a slightly better apartment, one with fewer roaches and a stove that didn't try to kill me every time I used it. I quit the gas station. That moment, clocking out one last time, throwing my disgusting polo shirt in the dumpster out back, that felt like freedom. I started networking hard, but quietly. Built a small online presence, contributed to open source tools, posted small wins without sounding like a show-off. My nights were still long, but now I was building systems, not just surviving. I took online business admin courses, learned how to invoice properly, how to manage multiple clients, how to write contracts that didn't screw me. No mentors, no safety nets, no big brother teaching me the ropes. Just trial, error, and a whole lot of caffeine-fueled stubbornness. Meanwhile, Nate's life was falling apart in slow motion. He went from landscaping to consulting, then to some MLM crypto scheme, then back to landscaping, but this time eco-friendly. None of it stuck. I saw pictures of his truck with a boot on it. Heard through a mutual friend he was living in mom and dad's basement again, blaming the economy for everything going wrong. My parents? Still pretending he was just between big breaks. Still calling him their entrepreneur. I didn't visit, didn't call, didn't ask for anything. And they never reached out either. Not once. Not even on my birthday. Then one day, something shifted. I was balancing 3 clients and building a tool for warehouse logistics optimization. Yeah, real sexy stuff, when I realized I didn't need to freelance forever. I had the skills, the experience, and the cash to build something of my own. No more begging for work or praying for gigs. I could be the one handing out contracts, calling the shots, setting the damn table instead of waiting for scraps. So I filed the paperwork, opened an LLC, chose a name that meant something only to me, a small nod to those nights spent eating ramen with an extension cord running across my mattress so I could charge my one working device. It was quiet, anticlimactic even. No champagne, no celebration. Just a click of the mouse and a notification that said, "Congratulations, your company has been formed." I sat there staring at the screen, blinking back tears I didn't expect. I wasn't rich, not even close, but for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I had done something they couldn't take away, something that didn't rely on their approval or their funding or their idea of what I was worth. And the best part? I had done it without them ever seeing it coming. 8 years can pass without warning when your life stops being about survival and starts being about creation. Real, tangible. This is mine and I built it from dirt creation. I wasn't rich in the yacht and vacation home way, but I was stable in a way that felt like rebellion. My firm specialized in logistics automation and business efficiency systems, mostly for warehouses and e-commerce startups that had grown too fast and too stupid. Not sexy work, not the kind that gets you on magazine covers, but it paid well and it kept growing. We started in my spare bedroom with a second-hand monitor and an IKEA desk I put together with 2 missing screws. Now, we had offices in Denver, remote staff in 4 states, contracts in 6 industries, and a client retention rate that made people call us lucky. But it wasn't luck. It was earned, one sleep-deprived night, one cold pitch, one grueling contract at a time. By this point, I was married to someone who didn't care about how I started, only about where we were going. Her name was Elise, and she had a smile like a storm, beautiful, powerful, a little bit dangerous. We met at a tech expo in Austin, both trying to avoid the awkward networking guy handing out stress balls with QR codes on them. We clicked in that way only too tired, overworked. Slightly cynical people can click, not like fireworks, but like puzzle pieces snapping into place. She was the first person I ever told the full story to, from the gas station nights to the moment I hit submit on my LLC paperwork. She didn't flinch. She just asked, "What are you building next?" My parents had become Christmas card people, the kind you only hear from once a year, through a generic greeting with a photo of them and the dog they never had when I lived there. They sent me updates about their garden, about retirement plans, but never once mentioned Nate. I figured things must not be going great on that end, especially when the tone of their messages turned vague and polite, like they were afraid I might ask them to visit. I didn't. I had nothing to say to them, and I figured they had nothing to say to me, not anything honest at least. Then one Friday afternoon, somewhere between back-to-back Zoom calls and a rushed sandwich at my desk, I saw the email. The subject line said, "Hey man, long time." The sender was Nate. I stared at it like it was a virus waiting to infect my good mood. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a full minute before I clicked it open. I wish I could say it was long and emotional, or bitter and accusatory, or even half-coherent. But it was none of those things. It was short. 5 sentences, maybe 6. He said he'd fallen on hard times. Said he knew we hadn't spoken in a while, but he'd heard I was doing well. He said he was trying to get back on his feet, that he was willing to start fresh. Then he asked, point blank, if I had any openings at my company. "I'll do anything," he wrote. "I just need a chance." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, rereading the words over and over again. There was a part of me that wanted to hit delete and pretend I never saw it. Another part of me, the part that remembered him getting my college fund like it was his birthright, wanted to send a single line, figure it out like I had to. But I didn't send that either. I walked away from my desk, poured myself a drink, even though it was still early, sat on the couch, and tried to imagine what Nate's life looked like now, the same guy who used to call me the backup plan behind my back, now out of options. I thought about all the years he had everyone's attention, all the faith and all the funding. And now he was emailing the kid they didn't believe in. I showed Elise the email later that night. She didn't say much at first, just read it quietly and handed the phone back. "You don't owe him anything," she said, not harshly, just honestly. But that wasn't the problem, was it? It wasn't about owing. It was about control. It was about the moment when the power shifted and I got to decide the terms. I realized then that I didn't want to ignore the email. I didn't want to block him. I wanted him to come see what I had built, brick by brutal brick, and I wanted him to walk through the front door not as a brother, not as a golden child, but as a job applicant. I went back to my desk, opened the reply window, and typed 4 words. "Sure, let's talk Monday." I sat there for a long time after clicking send, listening to the silence of my office, feeling something in my chest that I couldn't name. It wasn't victory. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter. Something colder. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but maybe the start of a reckoning. And if he thought I was going to make it easy, he hadn't learned a damn thing. Let him come. Let him walk into my world now. Let him see what I did with nothing. And let him start at the bottom. Monday morning came faster than I expected, though I had spent the whole weekend preparing for it in ways that went beyond schedules or assignments. There was a part of me that had rehearsed this meeting for years, not the exact details, not the logistics or the dialogue, but the sensation of control, of standing on the other side of the power that had once crushed me without blinking. I arrived early, as I always did, greeted by the cool scent of fresh ground coffee and the soft hum of startup energy, keyboards tapping, conversations bubbling around whiteboards filled with flowcharts and revenue projections. The office wasn't just modern, it was intentional. Everything had been designed to run efficiently, quietly, and with the kind of quiet confidence that said, "You're in the right place." I waited by the front reception with a black coffee in one hand, no sugar, no cream, just bitter and hot, the way I used to drink it during those endless graveyard shifts. The receptionist looked up when the elevator dinged, and I saw Nate step out. He looked older than I remembered, not in years exactly, but in wear. He had the same face, the same Toulouse smile he always wore when he wasn't sure how people were going to receive him. His shirt was buttoned wrong, literally one button off, and his tie looked like it had come from the clearance bin at a thrift store. His shoes didn't match, and there were small grease stains on the cuffs of his sleeves, as if he'd been fixing something on his car before coming in. I stared at him for a second longer than I probably should have, letting the moment stretch, watching realization settle behind his eyes. He reached out a hand and gave me that awkward, too firm handshake that people do when they think confidence is about grip strength. "Hey, man," he said, like we'd just run into each other at a barbecue. I nodded, gave him the same polite smile I give to vendors who waste my time. "You made it," I said. "Let's get you started." We walked past the open-plan workspace, past the sleek glass meeting rooms, and the people in blazers and headsets talking in half-code, half-business jargon. Nate looked around like he was trying to memorize the place, eyes darting from desk to screen to ceiling, like he couldn't quite believe where he was. I didn't say much during the walk. I let the silence do the work, let him stew in the moment. And then I opened the door at the back of the hallway and gestured for him to follow me down the stairs. Yes, stairs. We didn't put new hires in the basement. No one worked down there anymore. Not since we expanded to 2 floors. The space had been used for storage mostly, but I had cleared one corner for this very purpose, not dirty or dangerous, just stripped down to its bones. There was a desk, small, lopsided, missing a drawer. A monitor from the early 2000s sat on it, humming with the ancient kind of energy that makes your eyes ache after 15 minutes. The chair squeaked when I leaned on it. The carpet had coffee stains older than most of our interns. This was not a place you landed in by accident. This was a message. Nate looked at the space, then back at me, his smile faltering. This is it?" he asked, trying not to sound offended and failing. "Welcome to entry-level support," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. "You'll be handling user tickets, hardware requests, and a little bit of server cleanup. Don't worry, we've got some documentation, and you'll have Slack access. Eventually." He looked around again, slower this time, like his brain had started to catch up with the insult baked into the environment. I thought maybe," he began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "You said you'd do anything," I reminded him. "This is anything." He stood there, shoulders slightly slumped, mouth half open like he was about to say something he wasn't even sure he believed. I didn't wait for him to finish. I walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old, slightly wrinkled photo. It was the 2 of us, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sitting on the swing set in the backyard. I was holding a book. He was holding a water gun. We both looked happy, maybe the last time we really were. I taped it to the cubicle wall, just above the monitor, and stepped back. "Nice to have some history on the wall," I said, smiling without warmth. He stared at it for a long time, then sank slowly into the broken chair. It creaked loudly under his weight. I watched his eyes drift from the photo to the screen to the walls around him, and finally to me. Something passed across his face, not embarrassment, not quite anger either. It was the look of a man who was finally starting to understand where he stood. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room was doing the talking for me. And for the first time since he walked into my building, Nate said nothing. Just sat there, hands in his lap, staring at the monitor like it was going to save him. I left him there, closed the door behind me, and walked back upstairs into the light, into the company I built without a dime from the people who swore he was the one with potential. Let him sit in that basement. Let him start at the bottom. Let him figure it out one squeaky chair, one support ticket at a time. 3 weeks into the job, Nate looked like he had aged 5 years. His face, which used to carry that effortless smirk he always wore when someone else picked up the tab, now carried something far heavier, a hollow, quiet exhaustion that clung to him like smoke. The basement wasn't just a workspace anymore. It had become a sort of mirror, forcing him to stare at everything he'd never had to reckon with before. No flattering lighting, no admiring crowd, no parents to smooth the rough edges or bend the rules for him. Just ticket queues, broken keyboards, frozen drivers, and me, assigning every task with surgical precision, never overtly cruel, never violating company policy, but always a little too convenient in how the worst jobs landed in his lap. He worked the late shift, stayed past closing, cleaned up when junior staff forgot their responsibilities, answered the phone when irate clients needed help resetting their passwords at midnight. He did it all, mostly without complaint, though I knew resentment was growing inside him like mold in a sealed jar. The smile disappeared by the end of the first week. By the second, his replies had become clipped and automatic. By the third, he barely looked anyone in the eye, not even me. I watched it happen with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness, like watching a fire finally die down in a house you never wanted to see burn in the first place. Some of my staff started to ask questions, not loudly, not confrontationally, but I could hear the concern in their voices. "That new guy," one said to me during lunch in the break room, "He okay? Looks like he hasn't slept in a month." Another just shrugged and said, "He doesn't seem like he belongs here." I said nothing, just nodded, as if the situation required management discretion instead of moral introspection. It's amazing how easy it is to hide cruelty behind structure. You don't have to scream or humiliate someone publicly to destroy them. Just give them the worst desk, the worst hours, the worst kind of silence. And call it fairness. But one night, late on a Thursday when most of the building had gone dark and quiet, I walked downstairs to check something on our backup server, a real issue, not some excuse, and found him slumped at his desk. At first, I thought he was asleep. His back was hunched, his head in his hands, the flickering blue light of the monitor reflecting off his glasses. But then I heard it, not a sob exactly, more like a ragged breath trying to escape without being noticed. I stood there longer than I should have, the way people sometimes stand near an open door, unsure if they're about to enter or just leave forever. He didn't see me right away. I took a step forward, and his head jerked up fast, eyes red, face flushed with the kind of shame you don't fake. He looked at me like a child caught sneaking out a window, embarrassed and exposed and painfully aware of how small he'd become. "I'm fine," he said quickly, voice hoarse, wiping his face with the sleeve of that same wrinkled shirt he wore on his first day. "Just tired." "It's nothing." And for a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to nod, turn around, walk away, let the consequences of his life roll on uninterrupted. But something inside me buckled, not with pity, but with memory. I remembered sitting at the dinner table, 17 years old, trying to smile while our mother told me I wasn't going to college because Nate had real potential. I remembered her saying it like it was a fact, like it had been decided by the stars or a bank loan agreement. I remembered the heat in my face, the cold in my chest, and the hollow way my father added, "You'll figure it out, Jack." And now here we were. Full circle. Only now I was the one who got to decide whether someone else figured it out. I looked at Nate, really looked, and I saw the part of him that had never been asked to fight for anything, the part that was now realizing life didn't come with a parachute stitched by other people's praise. And I hated how much of me still wanted him to suffer for it. "Come upstairs," I said after a long pause. He blinked, confused, cautious, like he thought I was about to fire him. "Why?" "I want to talk," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Let's go." The walk back up felt like crossing into another world. He didn't speak. I didn't explain. We entered my office, the same office he probably pictured himself having the day he emailed me begging for a job. The walls were lined with framed patents, awards, and a few candid photos of staff gatherings, not one single trace of him among them. I sat down behind my desk. He stood awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like he was afraid to breathe too loud. "I've been watching," I said. "And I've been thinking." He said nothing. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You've been pulling weight in silence, and you've been doing it without shortcuts. That counts for something around here." His eyes narrowed slightly, still unsure where this was heading. "There's a role opening up in internal systems," I continued. "More responsibility. Better hours. Real mentorship. But you'd have to work for it. You up for that?" He looked at me like I'd just handed him a glass of water in the middle of a drought. Not overjoyed, suspicious. Guarded. "You really want me here?" he asked finally, voice low, like even the question made him nervous. I leaned back in my chair and gave him the smallest, most honest smile I could manage. "No, Nate," I said, letting the silence sit for just a second too long. But I want to be the kind of man I never had in my corner. He didn't respond. He didn't nod or thank me or reach across the desk in some dramatic brotherly moment. He just stood there, silent, staring as if he couldn't quite tell if he was being saved or punished. And to be honest, I didn't know either. Maybe that was the point.